Hey y'all, this is Tara Schaefer from the AARP Office of Volunteer Engagement, and today we're keeping it rural on the Roost. I am here today with our first time guest, Robin Szwanek. She is back for a new episode, and our friend in North Carolina, Mark Hensley. Mark, welcome to the Roost. Robin, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tara.
Yeah, so we are together today to talk about a fun experience that Mark and Robin had earlier this year or at the end of 2019, when they did a peer-to-peer exchange. And this is something that we'd been wanting to test in the Office of Volunteer Engagement for a while. And the opportunity just organically presented itself with these two. Robin is in one of my states that I support as an advisor, and I met Mark through one of our trainings, and we had just stayed in touch about a variety of things. And so one day in chatting about some of the things that they were doing in their communities and some of the things that they were wanting to do and make changes that they wanted to make, I just really felt that they would be able to have some great conversations together. Robin has been with AARP for a while, and Mark has been on board for 3 years. Is that right, Mark?
About 2 years.
2 years. And so, having not only a seasoned AARP professional with someone who is somewhat of a newbie, but also just two communities in two different parts of the country that have notably been doing great work in their own right. And so today we just wanted to get together and talk about what that experience was like for them, and really if it's something that we should continue to do. So I'm going to kick it over to you guys. And I think we said earlier, like, all right, what was the big takeaway from visiting? What was the thing that you really got from this experience?
So I'll go ahead and start. When we started our conversation, we did it before we got to see each other face to face. So we did it through some emails and a Skype that introduced us together. And what it led to is kind of some background information of kind of where we were in our jobs, what we were focusing on, and maybe some of the tools that we were using that helped us move forward. I can remember Mark sent me a wonderful graph of all the activities they were doing, and his formatting was different than mine. His recall of information was different than mine, but it was the same thing, only in a different format. And again, right away, it was eye-opening, because it's like, oh, I like how he did that. I could see doing this and sharing that with my volunteers. So I think one of my first walkaways was my maturity, meaning I've been here, like you've said, for 15 years, and the fact that Mark was new. I saw so many things in a different light that I had not raised my head to consider up until this point when I was stopped and did this sharing exercise. So that was before we even got to meet each other. The beauty of it was that we also got to involve our lead volunteers. So when we started setting this up, the whole idea was it wasn't just me meeting with Mark and seeing how he was doing things in his state. I was bringing my lead volunteer with me, and Mark was introducing us to his. Mark, did you want to share some words before we talk about before we got together?
Right. Before we got together, just chatting and being part of the same organization, but approaching our work in very different ways, but both being seen as being very successful in what we do. But the types of experiences we have for members and for the public were very, very different. And the way that we went about promoting our events was very, very different. And our big aha with myself and with volunteers is surprise and delight. We were not doing a lot of things that would be considered fun. And when I first started looking at the ways that Nebraska was distributing their information to the community on bookmarks, I was like, they give out bookmarks? What do you mean bookmarks? Because we use Amos and local media and word of mouth. And again, a surprise and delight was the fact that you can look through the lens of another professional and see things in such a different light that you would have never thought of. And it really enhances my approach to being open to new experiences and new ways of conducting our business and going from good to great.
Awesome. And thanks, Robin, for bringing that up. I think for our folks who are listening or watching who may not know that one of our key the key things that we try to incorporate into all of our work at the Office of Volunteer Engagement or in the Office of Volunteer Engagement is that partnership with volunteers. And so that was the crucial piece of this, that Mark and oh my God, Mark and Robin have their volunteer partners, all not just meet each other, but be part of this process. And that is what we build into our trainings. That's often what we build into our consultations when we're going out to the states, that volunteers should be at the table early and they should be at the table often in order for you to have the best groove. And so I'm really interested in us talking about, so how did it go when you started to plan this trip out? And especially, Robin, I think you said, I think we need to meet each other. And I was like, hold on just a second. Let me see if we can make that happen. And then I remember telling you, hey, by the way, make sure you invite Jan. And you were back to me in like just lickety split. So tell me what that was like as you guys started to start that conversation with your volunteer partners, and Mark, for you with your volunteer team who was going to be hosting.
On our end of it, we had just come out of the CLA, and we had my volunteer partner and I have still been working together in our community presence site, but it's starting to become routine. And so when this opportunity came around, it was like, well, this will be another added layer of freshness of new things we can learn together as a team. And we had learned so much together at CLA that this was just a natural progression for us. So of course, Jan was going to say yes right away, and we couldn't wait to get there to see how their system worked. I got to say, not only one of the many ahas that I found from this was not only the buddy system, like me bringing Jan and then meeting Mark's buddy and how well they work together. And actually, he has more than one, if you ask me. But I also realized the importance and richness of my buddy with being Mark now. It is so wonderful to know that I have somebody out there that I can text or email or call or Skype 24/7 who is going to be able to dig me out of that hole that I have landed myself in. And so gift after gift after gift keeps continuing to return to me in efforts such as this.
So my volunteer buddy, she also has a buddy. So Angie had gone with me. We've not been to CLA, but we've been to Teams Intensive. She's been to Volt training with Will. And then Angie has sort of her buddy volunteer. His name is Bob, and he is the lead for Home Fit. He's very passionate about that. And then we're fortunate that we also have an executive council member, Helen Mack, who is VFit. And we all sat down and said, we want to utilize this time with Robin and Jan. So we came up with an itinerary, not to make it so formal, but to maximize their time together with us. And this included really what time they were picked up at the hotel, that we intentionally went to some specific locations in our community presence that highlight our culture, our diversity. And I didn't realize what a huge impact that would have on Jan and Robin, because they were just walking around looking up at the architecture and saying, we don't have this in Nebraska. And we went to the International Civil Rights Museum and actually went through that experience. Well, there's not a lot of diversity in Nebraska. We had meals together with both Bob, Angie, and Helen Mack. And that exchange time was just really valuable because it was off script. We didn't have an agenda for those meetings. And not only were we utilizing that time together, but then we were getting together as a full volunteer group. And the ahas around the room for the volunteers, I think, was equally as valuable by including the full team in and this was leadership team. We actually did our 2020 planning with Jan and Robin in the room. And I think that was valuable to hear their perspective. They were listening, but they were also contributing. And I will say that Jan and Robin brought us nice gifts for our volunteers, which shamed me a little bit because some of the volunteers said, well, Mark doesn't give us nice things like this. So now I have a challenge to up my game on my giveaways. But we really used the time very productively. We went from early morning until late in the evening all the days because we wanted to maximize the time, but it wasn't tiring. It was invigorating.
Yes.
Well, we have to say, Robin, you and Jan, I don't know if I'm going to have to come shepherd you on your next trip so you don't get stuck in an airport. This is now their second time having delays, and this time they did get a hotel, thank goodness, on their trip, but that did not slow them down. And as far as I know, you guys still did all the things that you wanted to do. And as we started to plan this trip, really the freedom to set their own agenda was something that was really important to me. And I have said to both of you, and we often say this in our team at OVE, is the really good stuff often happens in the car ride or at dinner, or, you know, when you're not expecting that, when you're not doing something that is part of a structured agenda, although that is really good too. And so I'm so glad that you guys had this experience together and that you both shared that. And I know that your volunteers did as well, because I was also getting text messages from Helen Mack and I was getting notes from all of you. And as soon as Mark dropped Robin and Jan off the last night of their trip, I got a call from Mark about 8 or 9 o'clock one night to tell me all about how great their visit had been. So let's talk a little bit about what it was like for you guys. You talked about planning the agenda, Mark. Robin, as you guys prepared to go, or I know you were jazzed because neither one of you had been to North Carolina before.
Correct.
So that was exciting. And the location definitely did play into who went to visit who first, because it was probably smarter to go to North Carolina in the fall than it was to try to make it out to Nebraska. So springtime's going to bring North Carolina over to Nebraska. So talk a little bit about what it was like to be headed out to arrive with their team.
Unfortunately, we did lose a day because of air flight issues, but I have to tell you, as soon as we landed, it was like we didn't skip a beat. The mood was set perfectly with regards to when Mark picked us up. We went and picked up his lead volunteer, so immediately the four of us were together, and they took us to the International Civil Rights Museum. What's interesting in our thoughts were that Mark and Angie had already been to this Civil Rights Museum probably several times in their lifetime, but they gave us all the time we needed, answered our questions, and made sure that we truly were immersed in that experience. It was wonderful. It was eye-opening. As soon as we left there, again, we drove around into the couple of different communities that they're working in, heard some history about it, and they, again, allowed us the chance to just gawk and ask questions. That's when we then met up with Mac, and just having, again, sharing food together and sharing life stories was so important to get us bonded, to get off on that right next foot of let's open you up to the rest of the volunteers, let's open you up to our system, let's open you up to what we're working. And that's when the sharing of information, really getting deep into the roots of what we're doing started happening.
I think this was totally an unintended consequence, that when I pulled up the data and looked at the population of one of my main cities is Greensboro, the population of Lincoln, Nebraska is almost identical in numbers. And then, of course, Omaha is not as close as Winston-Salem. But again, I work in two very different cities the same way that Robin and Jan do. So that was a real eye-opening experience, that from demographics, from population. I still laugh that we went up a little hill in North Carolina and Jan said, "Are we in the mountains?" And the fact that so much of Nebraska is rural outreach, 2/3, as they said, 2/3 of the state, there's more cows than people. We have those same challenges here, that 80% of North Carolina is rural. So even though I have two main cities in my community presence, the rest of my territory of 16 counties is very rural, banjo picking, way out there. And so we did a lot of dialogue about how to do rural outreach. Robin has some great maps where she is showing pockets of volunteers across her state. And even though I don't cover the whole state, it was very valuable to see that rural strategy that we're putting into play now for 2020.
Great. Yeah, that brings up a really, I should mention, because we've used a few acronyms. So if anybody's listening who doesn't know, VFIT is our volunteer facilitation and training team. So Helen Mack is one of our volunteer facilitation and training team members, and she and I have worked a lot together. And then VOLT is our volunteer lead trainers. So Mark's partner, Angie, is a volunteer lead trainer there in North Carolina, and they actually have a few of those now. And this is just a network that we're starting to build out. So don't panic if you've never heard the terminology before. It is new, and we hope you'll be hearing more about the great work they're doing and want to get some of your volunteers involved. But yeah, that rural aspect, if you've listened to any of the other episodes that we've had, Seth Buffelli and I had quite a conversation about just how the work is different, and even how when you have those pockets of volunteers, I think their flexibility and their ability and willingness to step into gaps is sometimes larger than maybe someone who's in a city where travel time might be the same, but getting there is much less pleasant. So, when you look at those rural pockets and you see people kind of just spread out all over, but then you look at what cities are they close to that they'd be willing to step into to help out if you had a need or a request. I think that's one of the beautiful and advantageous things about our rural work. So thanks for bringing that up, Mark. So tell me, what happened as you guys went through your agenda and through those meetings? What were some of the takeaways, Robin, especially for you, as you guys were thinking, all right, we got to go back home and figure out what are we going to do to, spark some new ideas there. What were some of the things that came up for y'all?
When you meet good people, you become more invested in your job that you share with them. That was one of the things that truly resonated. In fact, from my volunteers' perspective, we looked at how Mark was doing his volunteer work there in North Carolina. And again, our structures are different. How he does his job is different. Where he works from is different. He works from home, I work from the office. But the core values remain there. And what we learned from Mark's home is what we want to try and sprinkle into our structure here. Jan said, because we don't have people, a lot of volunteers, I should say, going out there doing the DIY kits. It's nothing we've really integrated strong or weaved it into our work. Jan, who is a retired teacher, has said, Robin, copy me off some of those. I will read up on them and I will train the volunteers. We have struggled to this day to try to create a speakers bureau, but because she saw them in action, because she saw the enthusiasm that oozed out of Bob on his home fit, she's saying, I can do this. I can teach them how to do it. I've been teaching all my life. And it is a natural fit, but it was her seeing it and having the ask made. And I'll tell you, I didn't ask, she suggested it, and immediately I grabbed on it and I said, you would be great to do this. So sure enough, we're going to meet January 7th. We're going to do a full day of looking at the DIY kit, seeing what information we can order for brochures, and we're going to start setting up some trainings for our volunteers to gather that knowledge and comfort and be able to go out and do some of those kits. And that's all because of our visit to North Carolina and seeing how volunteers do it. When you meet good people, they will inspire you.
It was truly peer-to-peer mentoring, because Jan and Bob were having this dialogue, and Bob has said, I'll be happy to Zoom in and do a home fit training with your volunteers electronically. I think that would be great. Yeah, we have a strong speakers bureau, but I had just hammered away at the DIY. That's our bread and butter. Mm-hmm. And to see their perspective on that was very valuable to me. But likewise, Jan and Robin were teaching us about easy entry to engage people without gathering a name or an email or a zip code, to engage them. Let's just say an easy giveaway for coffee. And that gives an opportunity for volunteers to meet the community and to hand out their bookmark, which then the light bulb went off about the bookmark. It shows the upcoming events in the community. It has a way to register. They walk away with a cup of coffee, and the re-engagement that they're getting off of that was so very valuable. And then they're re-engaging. So there's a pattern here that really was valuable, because we're not having those. We're not having surprise and delight in the community. We're not having fun events at all. It's our stuff. It's all very DIY. We're going to teach you how to protect yourself against fraud and financial exploitation. but we're not giving away free coffee or going on a museum tour. She pointed out, she said, look at all this architecture and these buildings and parks that you have, and why aren't you doing walking tours? And, in my mind, I'm sitting here kind of writing down all of these things that I couldn't see because what's in your backyard, you don't pay that much attention to.
Oh, true.
And so we have now set our 2020 plan. Our leadership team has committed to having one engagement event that's more of an easy lift, free, surprise and delight for our membership in the community every month, and realizing that that's a building block into re-engaging people with our other fraud, caregiving, home fit, livable communities work. Jan was really shocked that in North Carolina, my position is all the hats. So you grocery shop, you cook, you serve, and wash the dishes. So I do advocacy, community engagement, livable communities, all the DIY, and advocacy, federal, state, and local. And, to hear her perspective, she is hungry to learn about some things that just by natural structure of Nebraska, they really do obsess on specific areas, and she's hungry to know, how does livable communities connect to what she's already doing, that we perceive advocacy through everything, whether it's little a or big A on the advocacy front, that it all connects. So we have so much more to talk about and so much more dialogue. We've already done that through Skype, and we plan to do even more of it before North Carolina packs up in the spring, thank you very much, after thaw, and goes to Nebraska. I cannot wait to experience putting real faces and the real terrain in comparison to the real wonderful work that Jan and Robin are doing in Nebraska.
Well, you'll love it, and I hope I get to go with you on this visit, or at least come meet you out there. Nebraska was one of the places that I had the gift of going because of my job, and might not have made it there for a while if it wasn't for that. And it has a special place in my heart. It's a lovely, lovely state, a beautiful state, an easy place to visit. The people are super nice, which when you're from the South, we are very critical of the hospitality. So everyone's always super nice, and it really is just a different world. And I think, Mark, like you said, we do take it for granted. We take for granted what's in our own backyard. And I think that's where, Robin, your volunteers up in Hastings and Grand Island brought up some things early in your work. And we talked about this in episode 1. So go back and listen so you can hear more about it. But about the things they identified that they thought people in the community were curious about. And, when they brought some of the ideas to the table, y'all were like, really? Somebody's interested in, going into this manufacturing facility or whatever. And they're like, yeah, it's a big part of the community, and it's a mystery to us. And knowing that we sometimes don't know the history of the architecture or the parks or whatever, we just enjoy that they're lovely and we kind of drive on by. I think that is a beautiful thing. And for you guys to decide you're going to incorporate something once a month, that is like, yes, sir. That is what a great commitment from the volunteers. And I hope your budget includes some better giveaways for them so that they are not feeling neglected. Nebraska does have really great gifting, so they always have really good stuff. Okay, guys, so I think that I've answered the question of, would you recommend this to others? But, tell me a little bit more about, were there any burdens or challenges about trying to figure out how to do this? And what is it, you guys were telling me before we started in that you have scheduled some regular ways to check in with each other beyond this experience. And so tell me a little bit kind of about the whole picture of what this new relationship is like. And, if you were giving advice to others as they were considering it, if they might express interest to one of us as the advisors with OVE, what kinds of things should they have in mind?
One of the nights that we were able to visit, just Mark and I, we worked on a lot of systems issues. Mm-hmm. So even though I've been here 15 years, he was showing me how to get around things. And at the same time, I'm telling him how I'm coding things. So, I mean, just the little nuts and bolts is mm-hmm. such a relief and makes my work faster when I get back at the office, to know how to breeze through something because Mark walked me through it. He has even gone so far on one of our Skype conversations where he's had me bring up my screen and he shows me where to click and how to do this. And it's like, he's the young one. He's the one that I should be trying to teach him some of these systems issues, but He knew it like the back of his hand. And the fact that it saves me so much time and gives me the confidence now to go out and do some of these systems things that I've never had to do before, it was a gift, just a gift. I can only give you one downfall, and that was our air traffic system. And that was out of Mark's control. It was out of my control. But you know what? It adds to the adventure. It makes it a fun story, and it'll always be remembered.
Absolutely. And Robin is being very modest that when we opened our computers and started showing each other things, she was using tools that are on my computer that I knew nothing about. So it was equal sharing. It was very valuable. And Tara, I have to really commend you because I think one of the keys is having an advisor that knows the personalities, the strengths and the weaknesses, if there are any, to make a partnership like this really click. And it's about the buddy system. It's about really using the same tools when we try to pair up volunteers. There has to be some connection. I feel like I've met a friend for life. And it started with communicating. We have the same kind of sense of crazy humor. We see things the same way, but we have that same level of passion about AARP and about our membership and what we do in the community. So we're both hungry, even though we're seasoned professionals. We're not seeing this as we're going to wind down and kind of coast into the next whatever. We just want to keep making things better. And it's really interesting to hear Robin's perspective on things and for her to hear my perspective. And we just keep that dialogue going. And it was worth every moment. I think everyone should go through this experience. And I have not been through CLA, but I'm not so certain that this is right up there with the value of CLA, which may or may not be in some different format. But I highly recommend the experience. And I can't thank you for the gift that you gave us.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for bringing that up, Mark, with CLA too. I should have mentioned that. Community Leadership Academy was something that we devised in OVE in partnership with OCE, the Office of Community Engagement. And we had 3 classes of that. And a lot of the intent was to teach some of the new tools and tactics that had come out of our experimentation in those enhanced community presence sites and the learnings that, we had really made an effort to come to the end of a test term with and say, here's what we know is working in communities, and now let's help you modify it for your community. So it was much more like a college course or a college, it's like intensive, and there's so much value there. But I was just smiling, Robin, as you were saying, hey, we were blessed to have CLA, but then we got into a routine. And I remember the spark in both your and Jan's eyes as you were taking some tools back from CLA and doing all the surprise and delight and fun with purpose and really getting to know the community more with listening and stuff like that. It's like some of those tools have kind of just made their way out into our work, but we're also looking at some ways to deliver that differently. One of our challenges had been as we approached, I guess it was 2019, that we had to think of doing our work differently. So it was not a budget issue. It was not even really a travel issue. It was, we know you're doing great things, but bringing everyone to one central location under these circumstances a few times a year, there's got to be a different way. And so we've been testing a lot of different things with that. And even our Teams Intensive is being redesigned and will launch in the spring. And it's going to look a lot more like some of the way that we have done our work with CLA, which is that it's not an easy, you don't come and just like sit on your, I almost said BlackBerry. You don't come and sit on your BlackBerry. You don't come and sit on, on your phone checking emails and just occasionally check in and nod. It is really involved, and that partnership with the volunteer is so important. And in that partnership with your other staff members. So one of the things I noticed, I'm friends with all y'all on Facebook. I started to see these conversations happening between your volunteers and between obviously some of you all and each other too. But it just made me so happy to know that, like you said, those bonds were real. And I heard some really heart-touching stories that were very personal about some of the things that you all were able to share, and realize that there's some big impact. And I think it was more more than just the surface of the work and even the working relationships. So like you said, some real friendships for life and some real therapy buddies in trying times. So it was just so awesome to hear that. And I applaud the work that you guys did, not only to prepare and to go and tough it out overnight in Chicago. Robin, we're going to give you the VFIT assigns a travel trophy every year for the person who had the crappiest travel year. And we decided at our year-end meeting that you needed to get that because you could be an honorary VFIT recipient of that award. But you know, really being open and saying, what can I take away from this experience is the number one thing that I would say. If someone is recommended to me and I can see that they're not going to be open to changing, who says every time, oh yeah, I've got this, or I've been doing this forever. As you said, you're seasoned professionals. Mark, you're not. You didn't just pop out of college. You've been at this work a long time. And you were still like, I know I can do things differently. And I know that there are things that we're probably missing because we're just on the hamster wheel. You know, we're just doing our work. We're just doing it. We're just trying to kind of survive. And I think it's interesting because the one difference, even though your communities look very similar, Mark, is that your state is larger. You're in a large state with how many staff members total?
We have, when we're fully staffed, 11.
Okay. And Robin, how many are in Nebraska?
5.
Uh-huh. And Mark is, you know, he has these couple of communities, but even though he has colleagues who do similar work, they're all busy doing their own work. So it's really easy to feel like an island sometimes, or that you're on an island by yourself, even in a larger state. And I know that from coming from the state office in Tennessee, that there were times when you're like, okay, see you later, you know, passing someone in the hall, and you didn't get a chance to really sit down and talk about how you could refine your work to do it differently, even if somebody right there in your own state was doing something really well. So so that's really I think a really neat thing too, to say it doesn't mean you don't have to be in the mega states and both be in that same boat to learn something from each other. You know, there's still some great learnings to be had by our friends all across the nation. So y'all, what else is on your mind?
Well, I consider us both being your hens now, living in your roost. And Mark and I have made it a promise that we are going to calendar in clucks every other week or whatever it takes for us to be able to continue this growth in our work, and to help our volunteers help us create new and exciting adventures.
Absolutely. And I did a small slide presentation for our staff in North Carolina to talk about this experience. And the last slide was Nebraska or Bust, spring 2020. So stay tuned for more dialogue after we make our journey out to the Midwest.
Yes, thank you so much. And we will be bringing back the volunteer partners for a conversation as well. We realized there was just so much depth to this experience. We wanted to start off with Mark and Robin as we are sailing into the end of the year, and this will be our first episode of the new year. But we will continue this conversation as well from this one experience. And then, as you all said, we'll have a part 2 after you all go out to the Midwest. So thank you guys so much for making time to join me today. I know you had both had very busy weeks and busy days today. It has been a pleasure as always. And thank you all for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.